and welcome to this 5th episode of Grace Notes. Sunday, January 16th, 2022, the Cathedral of St. John's Friends of Cathedral Music will be hosting a virtual concert featuring preeminent New York City-based early music ensemble TENET, vocal artists. TENET has won acclaim for its innovative programming, virtuosic singing, and command of repertoire that spans the Middle Ages to the present day. Today, I'm joined by 3 of the musicians from TENET, hailed by the New York Times as a golden soprano and a major force in the New York early music scene. We welcome soprano and artistic director Jolie Greenleaf, noted by the New York Times as an elegant, rich-toned alto with riveting presence, and who is also an original member of the groundbreaking Grammy Award-winning vocal band Roomful of Teeth. We welcome mezzo-soprano Virginia Warnken Kelsey. And last but not least, we welcome faculty member at Yale University who teaches the art of performance practice, keyboardist and conductor Jeffrey Grossman. Welcome to you all. Jeffrey, let's start with you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do at Yale.
Sure. So I work there as, I work with 8 graduate singers who are studying early music, basically the department that isn't the straight opera program. They do oratorio like Messiah, art song of all periods, and chamber music, vocal chamber music in particular. So I meet with each of them every week, and we coach with the harpsichord or the organ, all sorts of early music. And then I also teach a class that they take all 4 semesters they're there on performance practice, how we perform early music, how we ornament it, the kinds of issues that come up with interpreting old manuscripts or making new editions and planning concerts, that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun to work with young professionals who are going to go out, and many of them end up singing with TENET, including Virginia, who's with us today, who was an alum before I started teaching there, but it's a lot of fun to work with them.
Awesome, I bet. And that's a great segue. Virginia, tell us a little bit more about what you're up to.
Well, these days I am assistant professor of practice and voice at University of the Pacific's Conservatory of Music. I have a full studio of voice students there, and I teach diction classes and various, lectures on composition for voice and things like that. I also am a member of Roomful of Teeth, and we're sort of getting back into touring, and we've made a bunch of recordings this past year, which has been really fun as we've been able to get back into working. And I sing with TENET and love it.
TENET. Jolie Greenleaf, how did you guys come up with the word or the name TENET? And I'm curious to know what it means. And
yeah, TENET comes from 2 places. One is this idea that we were holding on to something that we believe in, kind of a principle, which is the sort of English definition. And then it also comes from tenere, which is something to hold on to or to hold. And it came about because the ensemble had been founded in a different name. And when I took over, I wanted it to have a fresh start, but I also wanted to at least look back to its roots. And then it just kind of stuck. And then we added vocal artists later because then it helps just add some real clarity to what it is that we're doing. It's predominantly about the voices and the music for vocal, the vocal music of the period. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
And what are some of your recent projects that you've done either pre-pandemic or during the pandemic?
We've been so lucky to do so many things. I mean, we're kind of most known for our performances of Claudio Monteverdi's Vespers of 1610 over a period of about 10 years. 11, depending on how you count them. And that project is now closed, but we have so many other things that we've been doing over the years. We had a run of doing programs featuring music for St. Cecilia's Day in November. Every year we have something that we call Tenebrae that basically uses the first 4 letters of our name in uppercase, hearkening to our name with the rest of the word in lowercase, but it's obviously the word Tenebrae that people know of from Holy Week. And so that means that each year we focus on something musical that highlights the Lenten period. So we've done St. Matthew Passion, we've done St. John Passion. At Christmas, we've done Christmas Oratorio, Handel's Messiah. So those are some of the big works. But we also really love doing more intimate programming, things like smaller programs of like Buxtehude's cantatas. We've done a lot of medieval music. We've explored Gesualdo's Tenebrae responsories, one and a part, which is super hard and super fun, and also just blows people away because the music is so thorny. And the medieval music was a real treat the last few years. I know Virginia's sung a lot of that with us. It's a lovely repertoire to explore that doesn't get explored a lot in such good ways. So yeah, I feel like the ensemble being based in programming versus just having specific personnel and programming for that personnel, but like instead choosing repertoire I'm really excited about, and then bringing people in that fit that has been such a gift to create variety and interest for us for a while now. And I think this is our 13th season. Last year was a little crazy because obviously, the pandemic made it impossible for us to do any live performances, but I feel really good about how we pivoted and created a lot of wonderful content with small forces, and it gave everybody a chance to think about the things they most wanted to present and never really had a chance to. And so in that sense, the pandemic brought forward some really cool, wonderful programming ideas. And yeah, this year is an interesting one because we think it's going to all be one way and we all have to be prepared for it to be something different. But this fall, we did a program featuring music of Robert Fairfax on the 500th anniversary of his birth, which is exciting because 500 just feels like a really long time ago, of course, but his music is really special. And I think most people were focusing on the music of Josquin, who obviously is a master, and it makes a lot of sense, but the music of Fairfax felt a little underserved. So we were happy to bring that forward. And then Jeff very graciously led us through 3 fantastic Messiah performances and a program of music by Michael Pretorius in December. And we were able to get those in before things got too crazy. And hopefully the spring will unfold in a way that, will have us in the room with other people, which is what we most love. And if not, we're going to make sure that we record them for people so that they can hear those too. So yeah, it's a busy time with a lot of zigging and zagging.
And so people can go to your website and still view these virtual performances. Is that correct?
That's right. So each concert that we are presenting live this year, we're also recording and then releasing a couple days later and making them available for 3 months. So if someone donates to have a virtual ticket, they can get a password and check out any of the programs that we have. That actually doesn't count for Messiah. That was just for December. We really wanted to feel like, okay, we're going to hold this to the holiday window. But they'll be out at some point. I think it's hard for any group to hold on to their content for too long without wanting to finally release it and make it public for people. So I'm sure that that's the pathway.
So the concert program that you're going to be sharing with our audience is titled Divine Women of the Court, Music by, for, and about women in the 17th century Italy. And the program includes 6 secular works by Venetian composer Barbra Stratzee, a work by the famous lutenist Giovanni Girolamo Cappelsberger, played here by 2 theorbos, and a work by the Italian keyboard virtuoso Girolamo Frescobaldi, played here on the harpsichord, and a work by Spanish composer with the ties to the Royal Chapel in Naples, Diego Ortiz. Before we go into some details about the composers in the program, one of you, feel free to tell us a little bit about the venue that you chose to make this video recording.
Sure, I'm happy to say a little about the venue. It actually is the new home that my husband and I purchased during the pandemic, upstate in Ulster County in a town called Accord, which looks like the word accord, but everybody in that area says it Accord. So we are bowing to those people who have been there much longer than we have. And it was built as an entertainment house, not as a place to be lived in. It was part of a larger property that had a main house on the land. And then the people who built it would come over and use it as an entertainment and relaxation space. Interestingly, originally it had quite a few hunting trophies on the wall from the 1930s, where people were still going out and hunting in the safari in Africa and bringing things back. Of course, it's not the same now because so many of those beautiful animals are now endangered. But the room was filled with all of these hunting trophies, and we never saw it that way, but we've seen lots of pictures from historical records in the area. And we thought it would be quite lovely karma to turn it into a music and performance space, which is our plan. So we used this program as the first chance for the space to be used, gave us a chance to really sense how the acoustic will work and how it's going to feel to be in there. So yes, you'll all be seeing what is going to be a future concert hall in the area.
I personally love the views of the hearth because it's just such a magnificent looking hearth behind the harpsichord there and tucked away behind it. It sort of gives you that sense of like, oh, this is like a very large sort of almost Henry VIII or Henry VII type space. So it's quite fun.
It is. And the ceilings are, we think, about 30, 35 feet high, which is what helps make the acoustic special. And that particular fireplace actually goes to the ceiling. So the stone carries up to the ceiling. And I'm not sure there was ever a shot of anything like that in India.
Not the whole thing, but you could kind of imagine it, if you've seen 16th century and 17th century fireplaces of the time. There are a variety of instruments that people will have occasion to hear and see in this virtual performance. There are 2 theorbos, I believe, viola da gamba, harpsichord, portatif, organ. And so I wonder, Jeffrey, if you'd like to chat about the instruments.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we had a wonderfully colorful continuo band to support these pieces. What's so great, they're just written as vocal lines with just a single bass line that we're all playing from. And so the 2 theorbos, and I figure out what makes the most sense. Do we need plucked sounds? Do we want the sustain of the organ? The harpsichord is an Italian model, so it's really perfect for this kind of music. It has that really plucky, direct sort of sound. And the theorbos get to make a wide variety of noise. And Shirley is playing viola da gamba, which, as you know, is very common in this period, sort of before the cello rose to its position as the default bass instrument, and adds just a great sound. We try to sort of create a sound world for the singers to float on top of or sing in the middle of. A lot of collaboration going on with sometimes the singers saying, oh, maybe Jeff, would you switch to organ there so we could have more sustain, more of that sound. Probably Stratzee didn't have an organ at her disposal, but it's such a great color. We couldn't resist ourselves.
Barbra Stratzee, who was she and why is she considered an important composer?
Barbra Stratzee was such an interesting person in that she was born. She's considered the illegitimate daughter of her father. And so what comes with that at that time is really rocky paths. And as a woman in particular, it closes a lot of doors that even to women who don't have that many doors open to them, it makes it even harder, the fact that she was not born into the right court circles. But somehow she was able to really find her way into that space, probably likely not only because her father was important, but because he welcomed her into the fold and he created opportunities for her to exist within these upper crust circles. She was a great composer. She had so many wonderful ideas. Her music was loved and purchased in her time, and that helped her rise to a position of not only having some fame, but also it gave her more privileges and more opportunities than other people might have had of her time. The program notes are by a wonderful writer and professor. I believe Emily's a professor now, but musicologist for sure. And those are also included on the page that people will see when they get there. And she talks a little bit about the detail of the history of Stratzee's life in terms of the birth. And many people thought that she was a courtesan. That's very much up in the air. There's no hard and fast proof of that. She did have 4 illegitimate children, 3 of whom ended up going into the clergy. So there are so many interesting social things that were happening at that time in terms of people's position in life, based on money, based on power, based on where they fit into the circles. So those things are somewhat complicated, but I think the really important takeaway is that she's just one of the very few women who were able to get her music published and seen by people of her day. And that was such a huge accomplishment that it's just worthy of taking a second, third, fourth look at what she wrote. And then when you do take a look at what she wrote, her texts are so interesting. She's largely composing music that is secular, which is really unusual for a woman at the time. Most women that were composing that were seen as standing the test of time were women who lived in convents and were only composing sacred music. So Barbra Stratzee is like really different and interesting in that her music is not sacred. I think she had 1 sacred book and everything else was secular. And sometimes it's just really interesting to see the way that she writes and the way that her texts come out. It feels somehow very feminine to me in a way that I don't know if Virginia, you feel that too, but it just doesn't sound and feel the same as so many of her contemporaries who were writing for women's voices, but completely from a man's point of view. Sometimes it's the turn of phrases or the expressions she'll use or the way that she sets words apart. It's just really exciting. Maybe Virginia, I don't know if you want to say a little more about that. Like your lament is so incredible and I feel like really unique in the repertoire.
Sure. I mean, I think her ability to sort of quickly go between a really rhetorical setting, very, very speech-based, and then sort of navigate seamlessly into these beautiful kind of lamenting kind of like arias almost. And the piece that I sang, I mean, I realize we're going to get into talking about that soon. They really do feel like it feels like a Shayna, but it also feels really, really natural and conversational. And I feel like that's part of that, why it feels like a really feminine perspective is because it's coming from she's not necessarily writing for characters. She's writing for it's all very personal. And she has such a personal relationship to these things. She's writing in her own voice. And I think that really comes through.
I think it's interesting, Jolie, one of the things you said was that, I believe you said that she published under her own name. And that was highly unusual at the time. Most women at the time were, if they were lucky enough to be published, were of course publishing under male pseudonyms. And so the fact that she was publishing under her own name and that people were performing her works at the time is quite extraordinary. And one of the first female writers of secular music to publish in this way as well. Virginia, something you said about the dialogue that happens between the singers. I think that that's something in this particular program that is of interest, certainly to me, as I kind of watched the program yesterday, and I thought, you sing together, but not in the way that perhaps develops later on in music history. It's more of a dialogue. It's more of a conversation. It's more of that. Not necessarily always polite conversation, but just conversation between the three of you on stage. Tell me a little bit about how you go about preparing a program like this.
Well, I think that, part of that is a creation of Jolie. These are all of the pieces on this program are for solo voice. But in order to make it feel intimate and sort of commiserating, she created sections of the music to be sung by me and Molly and Jolie, and so that it really does feel like we're having a discussion and finding moments to come together, just as we would if the three of us were hanging out, talking about all of our various problems and being real, real women as friends.
Yeah, and just to add to that, something so interesting about duet and trio music in the period is that, by and large, the way that they compose this music is that we're sharing the text, right? We're often singing the same text at the same time. And so in this way, having us take a solo piece by Stratzee and all of us either singing a line together or having us take turns singing lines and breaking it up, it magnifies the text in a way that I think was the composer's intent when he would create a duet and have two singers singing the same text at the same time, even if they're on different notes. Like, it magnifies the text in a way that makes it feel more powerful. And that was the goal with this too.
Perhaps we could talk about two of the larger solo works, Lamento and Lacrime Mei.
I'll go first. Lacrime Mie is quite a dramatic one from Stratzee. You'll hear right from the very opening of the work that it starts with this very lamenting, melismatic line, which sets the tone for the whole piece. That comes back a couple of times as the refrain of the work. And in between, it's very much telling you about what the lament is, why there's lamenting. That particular one, as beautiful as it is much more formulaic than the one that Virginia does, which is also a lament. There's so many laments in this repertoire. It was very common for people to write about their sorrows. So you get a lot of that in this program, and you get a lot of that in the writing in general. Virginia's is quite...
You just have to look at the translations, and you see the word tears so often in the translations. Yes.
Yes, that and morte, death, right? You get a lot of those. And Virginia, I hope you'll talk a little bit about yours. Yours is so interesting and special, and such a commentary on the day that it's unusual for so many reasons.
Yes, that is true. It's it has a true well, it tells a true story, and it has a narrative, and it goes beyond the sort of normal "woe is me, I'm so sad, my heart is broken" kind of thing. And it's a political intrigue, romance, all of these things. So it tells the story of of one of the favorites of Louis the 13th. Is that correct? It was one of those Louis. I believe it was Louis the 13th, and a favorite of the king, a young man by the name of Henri de Cinq-Mars, and he was a young knight, and he was very close with the king. In fact, there's rumored that there's a little bit of a romance happening there. And which comes out in the text that Henri as a character, or Enrico, as we say in the Italian text that Stratzee set. And so the story is told both through a narrator and through Henry as like in first person. And sort of we have Henry's lament bookended by a narrator's commentary, which is really interesting. And so the story goes that there's the Comte de Richelieu, who's one of the, sort of political figures in the court, had been planning to betray the king in this way. And he's a longtime counselor of the king. And so Henri plots to then overthrow the Comte de Richelieu. And then when the king finds out about it, he has Henry executed. So very, very political. And we think that the reason why Barbra Stratzee wrote about this is because her family, they were supporters of Henri in this sort of, we all have our political factions that we ascribe to. And Stratzee, they ascribe to the Henri side of things. And so, so yeah, it's really, really strange. You have a lot of Henri who comes back or Henry who comes back as a ghost. Like he's telling this narrative is as a ghost, and him, talking about how he acted out of love and how he, he feels the guilt and the weight of it all. And he believed himself to be acting in the best interests of the king, who was his love. And so it's just a really, really interesting text. That's really obscure. It took a lot of sort of parsing out and research into figuring out what exactly this text meant, because when Jolie first asked me to sing it, it was a complete mystery. So
I can only imagine that a lot of your time spent preparing the actual music part is you probably spent an equal amount of time, if not more so, researching the storylines and trying to figure out, is this imaginative? Is it real? Is it based on any sort of truth? Is it somewhat biographical? Is it what is it, right?
Yeah, this is definitely a case of that. It's so unlike any other music that I've sung from this period. It's has these very true story biographical roots in it. And so, which makes it, for me, I mean, it's one of my favorite pieces to sing, like, period. And because of that, because you can really, it's sort of a mini opera almost, and you can really, really delve into characters in that way and make them come to life.
I think that's the thing that I learned about Barbra Stratzee, is I didn't really know that she wrote these, like you said, mini operas. These are 10-minute-ish long works for the voice, and they really take you through quite a story, musically speaking, and just, if you're reading the text along. And I love the fact that on your video, you have some of the text and translations that run across the screen, so that people don't have to be glued to their printout PDF, but can actually just really sit back and enjoy watching you guys.
Yeah, I think that's deciding to have the texts come across is such an important element, because I think that it's really easy for people to hear these pieces and not realize that there's so much more behind them, not only just in terms of the text that's happening, but also just the building of a piece. I mean, they thought about these things so differently. And the idea of having just, often in more modern music, you have a piano and a voice, and the idea is that the piano offers all of the different colors and ideas that are going to support the vocal line, and the vocal line is going to be creating the sound world in a different way than they did then. There's such a close relationship between the arioso type feel and the recitative type feel in this music, and the idea that we would build a sound world with a lot of continuo players, so that you don't just have one single person, you might have 4 or 5 or even 10, and they would band together and form little, okay, this is what we're going to create in sound world for this moment. And it highlights the music in that way. And I think that one of the reasons that her music was overlooked for so long was because people really didn't understand, oh yes, we're actually creating a lot of elements ourselves. We're not being given this information. We have to take everything we know from the period and pull it together and create our own stamp on how this piece could sound with all of these various colors. And to me, that's one of the most wonderful and inspiring things about this repertoire, is that we have so much to add. It's like jazz in that way. It sounds too simplistic to say it's like jazz, but then the forming of chords and then the colors created. There are lots of times where you can have multiple chords that sound good in a particular moment. And deciding those is an educated practice, and choosing instruments that will fit to make a text come alive. It's a form of educated practice. And people like Jeff are just the best of the best to do that.
And alongside that educated practice comes this, very, very important component of personal character and personal ability. And, that's the thing about what each of you bring to this particular program is just your entire selves, your entire life full of music learning and musicianship all comes into a program like this. This is, like you said, it's not written on the page. The band in the background is all, you guys are all making it up, right? Am I right, Jeff?
Yeah, totally. It doesn't look like much on the page. It's like a single F in the bass line and a simple looking melodic line. And it's up to people like Jolie and Virginia to make that into expression, and we support it in whatever way we can. But yeah, we're making it up.
It's incredible. It's truly incredible. And I thank you so much for giving that insider vision, because I think a lot of people just assume it's like Bach, it's written on the page and you just interpret it and we're off and running. This is a whole other level of musicianship required. I would love to get into tuning and temperament and, all kinds of fun stuff. I wonder if maybe we could just touch upon tuning and temperament just very, very briefly.
Sure. Very briefly. Yeah, it's a real rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole.
The nerdiest of us, and I'm one of them, obviously. So we, yes, I'm sure. So back sort of in this period, they, the simplest explanation is that on a piano, the distance between all the notes is the same. Like C major sounds the same as C sharp major, sounds the same as D major. And in this period, the way that they tuned was very different. And in particular, we use a tuning for this called quarter comma mean tone temperament, which basically means that all the thirds are really, really beautiful and pure. The major thirds of all the normal keys. So this gives the music a very special kind of color. And it was definitely the dominant tuning in the 16th and 17th centuries before they started branching out. And the side product of this is that if all those thirds sound really beautiful and pure and serene, the weirder thirds sound really ugly and crazy. And so in particular, in Virginia's piece, there are a lot of F minor sounds. F minor is like a wild, crazy key that nobody should ever use in this period. And Stratzee uses it for a specific reason, that she wants these weird sounds. And it's wild. I mean, it's really cool. But it also means, like, as you know, as an organist, like on the organ, we can't, if we play these intervals, they will sound like we've played wrong notes. If I play an F minor chord with an A flat, it sounds horrific. So I end up leaving them out and the lutes fill them in. It just, you don't think of tuning. It's not one of these things that most audience members are going to notice, but the effect of it on your ear, even people who would say, oh, I have no idea, it contributes, I think, to this otherworldly soundscape that you don't get in an orchestra playing Bach or playing later music. So, yeah, in particular, this early Italian music, Stratzee and Monteverdi and Frescobaldi, it just comes alive when you have the right tuning going on. Because when you get to these final cadences that always are major, they're always a beautiful major third, there's this sense of like peace and rest that if you do it on a piano, even if you don't know that why, it just doesn't sound as right.
And it's something really that instruments tuned a certain way, and obviously the human voice can really only access, right? That's what makes this so incredible, is that the human voice is the key here.
Yeah, definitely. The voice as the most flexible. I mean, especially, again, when you have singers who know what they're listening for and how they're thinking, like Jolie, Molly, and Virginia, who know that, in this tuning, all the flat notes are really, really high, and all the sharp notes are really quite low, which is, it sounds counterintuitive, but if you just take a normal singer, a regular singer out of conservatory, it will feel very weird to them. It won't work. It does take people who've done this for a long time and really have spent the time to get comfortable with it. The other thing I should say, of course, is that at this time, where we put A was highly variable from one country to the next and one town to the next. So in some places, A was way low compared to the modern A. In some places, it was really high. I honestly don't even remember what we used for this recording, but this music works at a I mean, of course, it also depends on the singers' voices, and but this music it's this whole other universe of issues.
That's true. And for this program, I'm not sure what we did either, but I know that as an ensemble, what we tend to do is try to make sure that we're fitting with the voices, because ultimately we want to make sure that our voices are going to feel and sound right in the space that we're in, as well as for the music itself. But yeah, Jeff's right. Like, there's so much music that you can see it was meant to be lower, and it feels right lower because of the notes that they chose. And some music, you see that it was meant to be higher and genuinely feels better and sounds better higher. So yeah, it's a movable target.
I think we used 415 for that program, which A equals 415 is a half step lower, essentially, from our modern A.
Thank you all. This conversation is really just to serve as an appetizer to what I think is a delicious meal. And the hour-long program will include a downloadable program, as Jolie mentioned, with texts and translations and some background on Barbra Stratzee, some the artist biographies, and beautiful, well-lit, up-close views of all of the artists. And I'm so grateful to each of you, Jeff and Virginia and Jolie, for taking some time from your day today to speak with me about the Women of the Court program. To our listeners, please visit fcmabq.org to purchase your ticket for Sunday, January 16th's concert. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a delight to talk to you.
Thank you.